Christmas Eve smelled like cinnamon, nutmeg, and betrayal. Though I wouldn't know about the last part until later that night. At the time, I was just humming along to the Nat King Cole record spinning in the corner, carefully placing pecans onto the pie I made every single December 24th. It was Nick's favorite. Or at least it used to be. Before we dive in, we'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below letting us know where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. We're excited to connect with all of you, so don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more amazing content. Now back to the story. My name is Savannah Lane, 32 years old and married, well technically. I lived in a charming two-story colonial in the sleepy town of Ridgebend, Oregon. Population. Small enough for your business to spread faster than wildfire, but polite enough that folks still pretended not to know your secrets. I used to believe in fairy tales. The kind where a woman gives her all to build something solid with the man she loves, and in return he protects her heart like the fragile, irreplaceable thing it is. I believed in loyalty, sacrifice, and sticking it out during the hard seasons. But as I slid the pie into the oven that night, I began to question what I'd gotten in return for believing in all that. Nick, my husband of 7 years, had been distant for months. At first it was the usual excuses: work's busy, babe. Just tired. Don't wait up. But those nights at the shop grew longer, the excuses thinner and the lies sloppier. I'd see perfume on his collar that I didn't wear. Hear him laugh at texts that didn't come from me. So I held on. Because when you've given up your life in Seattle to move back to your husband's tiny hometown so he could open his dream furniture design business, you want to believe the sacrifice was worth it. When you've cashed out your personal savings to fund that same business, skipping your own ambitions, postponing having children, you tell yourself there's a greater purpose in your patience. But that night I decorated the house like always. Gold and white lights twinkled on the porch. The living room smelled like pine and apple cider. 2 stockings hung over the fireplace. One for Nick and one for me. Mine still said "Savvy," embroidered in gold thread by his mom on our first Christmas as a married couple. I'd wrapped the last of the gifts and placed them under the tree when his headlights pulled into the driveway. 9:07 p.m. No text. No call. Just an engine shutting off and boots crunching snow. He came in without looking up from his phone. "Hey," I offered, forcing warmth into my voice. "I saved you some dinner." "I'm good." He brushed past me, smelling faintly of sandalwood cologne he never used to wear. His jaw was tighter than usual and his leather jacket still had snow on it. "Just tired." I followed him with my eyes as he moved through the house like a stranger. Not a single compliment on the decorations. Not even a glance at the tree I'd trimmed alone. He tossed his keys in the bowl by the door and walked over to the fireplace. "I got you something," he said, tone unreadable. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out a small square envelope. He placed it on the mantel right between the stockings. "Merry Christmas, Savannah." I frowned. "You're giving it to me now?" He didn't answer. Just stepped back and looked at me. Really looked at me. And I knew. That envelope wasn't a gift. My hands went cold. "What is this?" He didn't blink. "Open it." The silence between us was so loud, I could hear the ticking of the kitchen clock from the next room. I walked slowly to the mantel, picked up the envelope and slid it open with my nail. Inside, a neatly folded packet of papers. Divorce. I didn't say anything. Didn't gasp, didn't cry. I just looked up at him and met his eyes, and he, coward that he was, looked away first. "You couldn't even wait until after the holidays?" I whispered. He shoved his hands in his pockets. "I figured it'd be cleaner this way. No kids involved. We don't even really talk anymore." I blinked. "You mean you don't talk anymore?" "I'm not going to fight, Save. Not tonight. Just look it over. Sign it. My lawyer will handle the rest." I stood there, the paper trembling between my fingers, heart numb and eyes dry. There was so much I wanted to say. So many questions I could have asked. But something inside me locked up, like a storm door slamming shut just before the hurricane hits. He walked toward the stairs like nothing had happened. "I'll sleep in the guest room," he muttered. "Don't bother," I said quietly. "Go sleep wherever you've been sleeping." That stopped him. Only for a second. Then he shrugged like it didn't matter and kept going. After the door upstairs closed, I stood alone in the glow of the Christmas tree, staring at the papers in my hand. And then my phone buzzed. A message from Amanda, Nick's sister. Guess he won the bet. Thought you'd cry. Merry Christmas. I stared at that text like it was a bomb. My thumb hovered over the screen. My breath caught in my throat. He bet I'd cry? Suddenly everything fell into place. Amanda's smirks at Thanksgiving. The smug distance Nick had lately. The way he didn't even try to explain himself. Like this had all been planned. I felt something rise in me, something old and buried. A rage I didn't recognize. A fire that burned hot, not wild. Cold tears threatened to form, but I swallowed them. I would not cry. Instead, I walked to the table, picked up the pie and placed it gently outside in the snow. It didn't deserve to be wasted. But it sure as hell wasn't going to be eaten in my kitchen by a man who thought this was all a game. I sat on the couch, stared at the blinking lights on the tree and pulled a blanket over myself. The woman he thought I was, the quiet, forgiving doormat wife who kept the peace, died that night under the weight of twinkling lights and shattered vows. And in her place someone new was born. Someone who wasn't afraid to go to war. I woke up the next morning to an empty house in silence that felt like a slap. Nick was gone. The guest room door was open, the bed untouched. His boots were missing by the door, his leather jacket no longer on the hook. There wasn't even a note. Just the lingering scent of that new cologne and the weight of those divorce papers still sitting on the mantel mocking me. I didn't touch them. Instead, I made coffee the way I always did, extra strong, a splash of vanilla almond milk, and stood barefoot on the cold kitchen tile, staring out the window as the snow came down in slow, lazy spirals. The pie was still sitting outside on the deck, frozen solid now. The one thing I had prepared with love, still whole and untouched. I should have cried. I should have crumpled on the floor and sobbed into my robe, mascara running, heart split wide open. I should have felt broken. But all I felt was hollow. Like something inside me had snapped shut during the night, and what was left was quiet, precise and calculating. After all I had given. After 7 years of late nights helping him build Lane-crafted interiors, designing the logo, running the books, attending every trade show, even hand-painting signs when we couldn't afford a printer. I was the one who pulled him through when the bank almost foreclosed on his first studio. I was the one who convinced my uncle in Seattle to invest during the rough year of COVID shutdowns. And now he was leaving. Not just leaving, but betting with his sister that I'd fall apart. Well, I wasn't going to fall apart. I was going to find out everything. I started by calling Trina. She was my best friend, someone I'd known since college. We had met in a brutal graphic design class where everyone else treated creativity like a competition. Trina, with her bright braids and biting sarcasm, had once slapped my sketchbook out of a guy's hand for criticizing it. She was fiercely loyal and better than any private investigator you could hire off Google. I told her everything. Not the soft version. The real one. The silence on the line lasted a beat too long. "Girl," she finally said, voice low and dark, "we are not about to let this man turn you into a sad Christmas story. I need help. Real help. I think he's been planning this. Hiding things. There's something off. More than just cheating." "Oh, he's definitely cheating," she cut in. "That part's obvious. But yeah, something deeper." She had her laptop open within the hour. She found Bridget first. Bridget Ellis, a marketing coordinator at a nearby real estate staging company. Young. The kind of pretty that looked like it came with a trust fund and a Pilates membership. Pictures of her and Nick were all over her private Instagram. Not his. Hers. "Oh look," Trina muttered, screen sharing with me on Zoom. "They were at the Lakewood last weekend. Cute. Isn't that where y'all had your anniversary last year?" I stared at the photo. His hand was on Bridget's lower back and she was grinning like she'd won the lottery. "I'm going to ruin them," I said. "Calm." Dead calm. Trina grinned. "There she is." But I didn't just want revenge. I wanted facts. Paperwork. Leverage. I reached out to Matt DeLuca, the lawyer who helped Nick and me register Lane-crafted interiors. He used to be a local friend of Nick's, but I'd done most of the business correspondence with him. I set up a meeting at his office under my maiden name. He looked surprised to see me. "Savannah. Well, it's been years. I need to know what exactly my name is still attached to," I said without pleasantries. He blinked. "Well, the business, of course." I leaned forward. "I thought Nick filed a name removal 2 years ago." "He did. But you never signed the final version. I sent the documents over, but they were never returned. So technically, He flipped open a folder and scanned the papers. "You're still a 40% owner." 40%. That hit me like a second slap. Nick had made me believe I was out. He'd convinced me to step back and focus on self-care, while he brought in someone new to help with expansion. But legally my name was still on the business, which meant he'd just tried to divorce his business partner without telling her. I exhaled slowly. If he's been using business funds for personal travel, can that be investigated? Matt gave a slow, knowing smile. "Savannah, with the right forensic accountant and legal pressure, we can crack open every receipt since last tax season." I left with copies of the business documents, ownership terms, and a renewed sense of purpose. By New Year's Eve I had everything I needed. Emails between Nick and Bridget plotting the rebrand of Lane Crafted Interiors into a new company, Modern Nest Designs. Guess who their initial seed investor was going to be? Me. Oh, my uncle. The same one Nick had quietly emailed behind my back, pitching his new independent design vision, banking on the fact that family loyalty would make the check easy to sign. I sent my uncle a detailed email. Attached were photos of Nick and Bridget, business registration records showing that I was still a 40% owner, and the digital forensics of Nick forging my digital signature on at least 2 supplier contracts. My uncle called me the next morning. "Savvy, you need to destroy him." I planned to. I hired a female-led legal firm out of Seattle that specialized in creative business litigation. Fierce, sharp, and built for war. My lead attorney, Rhea, had fire in her eyes and a voice like broken glass. "Men like him think emotional manipulation is currency," she said during our first meeting. "Let's bankrupt him." By mid-January, we had filed an injunction to freeze the business bank accounts under suspicion of misuse and fraud. Every vendor he'd signed a contract with for Modern Nest received a cease and desist letter. He'd used my previous designs, my brand colors, and even my interior layouts in his new plans. Every blueprint had my fingerprints on it. He just assumed I'd never fight back. But now his shiny new world was collapsing. Quietly, legally, piece by piece. Amanda tried to call me once. I didn't answer. Instead, I forwarded the call to my attorney. Trina, meanwhile, had one last gift for me. A video. From a hotel security camera in Lakewood, where Nick had apparently drunkenly admitted to Bridget in the hallway, "Savvy's soft. He'll cry, get it over with and move on." Bet Amanda $100 she'd bawl her eyes out. Bridget had giggled. What if she finds out? She won't. I watched it once. Just once. And then I smiled. Because when I showed it to Rhea, her exact words were, "Motive. Malice. Premeditated fraud. This isn't just divorce anymore. This is court-ready vengeance." I didn't cry when I watched it. Not a tear. Instead, I walked to my closet, pulled out the red dress I hadn't worn in years, the one Nick said was too much for small-town dinners, and zipped it up over a brand-new version of myself. The part of me that begged for scraps was dead. The woman I was becoming, she was going to bury them with their own arrogance. And when I was done, they'd wish I had just cried. Nick always thought he was the architect of his own success. Some visionary carving a legacy out of reclaimed wood and overpriced dreams. But he didn't realize I'd been the one laying the foundation beneath his feet the entire time. And now, as I stood outside the grand opening of Modern Nest Designs, watching the smug smiles and clinking champagne flutes from behind a tinted car window, I felt nothing but surgical focus. It was a frigid Saturday in late January. The streets of downtown Ridgebend were dusted in frost, and the sky was that dull gray that made everything feel like a paused movie. Across the street, people gathered under the golden cream balloon arch outside Nick and Bridget's launch event. Fairy lights glowed in the windows. There was even a tiny stage set up beside a banner with their logo, Modern Nest Designs, elevating everyday living. My logo. My tagline. I'd written those exact words 2 years ago for a campaign Nick said he didn't like. Guess he changed his mind once he found someone else to take credit. The storefront looked beautiful, I'll admit. Polished concrete floors, minimalist window decor, those pretentious little Scandinavian chairs with no back support. Bridget stood at the center in a blush satin jumpsuit, smiling for pictures, holding a wine glass she hadn't paid for. Nick was next to her in one of those creative entrepreneur blazers, talking to a local news crew. A few months ago that would have crushed me. But now. I stepped out of the car, heels clicking against the pavement like warning shots. I was dressed in slate gray from head to toe. Coat, heels, gloves. Sharp lines. Clean edges. And under my arm, a slim black folder that would flip their world inside out. The moment I stepped through the glass door, Bridget noticed me. Her smile flickered. Nick was slower to react, but when he turned and saw me standing there, confident, dry-eyed, unmoved, his entire face froze. "Savannah," he said, voice tight. "Oh good," I said, glancing around at the catered setup. "You're both here. Makes this easier." Bridget's voice came out like forced air. "This is a private event." "Actually," I said, pulling the folder from my arm and laying it on the welcome table with deliberate grace, "it's a public violation of business law, trademark infringement, and intellectual property theft. But I suppose the catering's nice." Nick moved quickly, snatching up the folder. He flipped through the papers, face paling with each turn. "You can't be serious." "Oh, I'm deadly serious," I said, smiling without warmth. "You thought you'd cut me out quietly. You thought I'd stay silent, stay sad. But you forgot something, Nick. I was the business. Every proposal, every client lead, every supplier you just tried to reuse. I brought them in. And now they're gone. All of them." He shook his head, chuckling like I was some unhinged ex-wife. "You're trying to tank my company." "No, sweetheart," I said, leaning in close enough for only him to hear. "I'm taking back mine." I looked over his shoulder and saw Bridget frantically typing on her phone. Probably trying to call their lawyer. Too late. Rhea had already filed the temporary injunction with the county clerk yesterday. The moment Nick accepted delivery of those papers. Now, in this moment, their accounts would be frozen. The news crew approached us, sensing drama. The photographer with the Ridgebend Daily lifted his camera. "Is there an issue here?" he asked. Nick opened his mouth, but I beat him to it. "Just clarifying business ownership," I said sweetly. "Turns out things aren't always what they seem." He turned beet red. "Don't do this here." "Where should I do it?" I said louder now, looking around. "In court? In the press? With the IRS?" People were watching now. The party atmosphere had cracked. A few guests started murmuring. One of the suppliers I recognized, Lena from Whitmore Lighting, was already pulling out her phone. "Nick," she said, furrowing her brow. "Is she telling the truth?" He didn't answer. I stepped forward. "Everything in that folder is backed by receipts, contracts, emails, recorded voice memos. He used my name, my credit, my portfolio, and my connections to fund this place. Without my permission. He even forged my signature on supplier contracts. It's all documented." Bridget's voice cracked. "You're lying. You're just bitter." "About what?" I cut her off. "That he brought you here on my money? That I was the one who paid the first 3 months' lease on this building, thinking it was for a satellite location of our business? Do you know how easy it is to trace the payment trail when you know where to look?" Nick lunged forward like he was going to snatch the folder out of my hand again, but I held up a second one, an exact copy. Already submitted to the county. And the police. And the bank that was about to issue you a business loan, by the way. That's on pause now. He looked like he wanted to scream. But he didn't. He just stood there, jaw twitching, seething beneath the surface. I turned to the crowd. "I'm sorry to disrupt the party. But you deserve to know the truth before you invest time, money, or trust in this operation. Modern Nest Designs is built on stolen work and fraudulent documents. My name is still legally tied to 40% of the original company. And my attorney has already filed for full dissolution of all connected assets until the matter is resolved in court." I met his eyes one last time. "You should have known better, Nick. I may have loved you, but I never needed you." Then I walked out. Outside, Trina was waiting in the car, engine idling. The moment I climbed in, she let out a breath like she'd been holding it all morning. "Damn," she said. "You really did it." I leaned my head back against the seat and closed my eyes. They deserved worse. "Oh, don't worry," she said, smirking. "This is just the first wave." And she was right. The second wave came later that week, when Nick's name hit the local business watch list. Fraud investigation. Pending lawsuits. The contractors who had done the initial build-out on Modern Nest filed a lien against the property. Clients backed out. Local banks withdrew their support. Bridget posted a story on Instagram about how some people can't let go of the past, but it was promptly drowned out by comments dragging her for trying to build a business on betrayal. Amanda, of course, tried to reach out. She sent me a voice note that started with, "Hey, I think this is all just a misunderstanding." I deleted it before it finished. The only reply I gave her was forwarding her voicemail to Ria's office. In the weeks that followed, I rebranded Lane Crafted Interiors into something better. Savannah Lane Studios. I didn't just reclaim what was mine. I built it again from the ground up with my name on the door, my story in the press, and a community of women business owners rallying around me. The first event I hosted in my new studio wasn't a launch party. It was a legal aid fundraiser for small businesswomen dealing with abusive or exploitative partners. Trina gave a speech. Ria did too. We raised over $30,000 in one night. Nick never showed his face. But he did send one thing. A text. "You win. I regret everything. I just wanted out. I didn't think you'd fight like this." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I blocked his number. No response. No closure. He didn't deserve either. What he deserved was exactly what he got. To watch me rise higher than he ever imagined while he stood in the ruins of his own hubris. And as the snow began to fall again that night, I stepped onto the balcony of my new office, a warm drink in my hand, city lights glowing beneath me. Peace. Not silence. Not sadness. Real earned peace. And it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever created. A year later, almost to the day, I stood in the middle of my own Christmas gala with a champagne flute in my hand and a necklace of glass-cut emeralds brushing the hollow of my collarbone. The event hall was glowing. Gold chandeliers reflected off glass centerpieces, and the laughter of my guests echoed between string quartet interludes and clinking crystal. I was at peace. But more than that, I was powerful. Savannah Lane Studios had become one of the most sought-after design firms on the West Coast. My studio in Seattle had expanded into a full team. Designers, assistants, marketers, all women with something to prove and stories like mine. What we created together wasn't just design. It was resurrection. The press had caught on too. They called me the comeback queen of clean lines. A few whispered divorce mogul, which I secretly loved. Clients didn't just come for interiors. They came for the message, the spirit behind the brand. I taught them how to reclaim space, literally and figuratively. I wasn't just the woman who survived betrayal. I was the woman who weaponized it. At the gala, I moved from table to table, accepting congratulations and compliments with the calm grace of someone who knew she belonged. Trina had outdone herself with the planning. Warm lighting, rich velvets, and just enough sparkle to feel like magic without trying too hard. She raised her glass to me from across the room and I smiled. "Savannah," a voice said behind me, soft and cautious. I turned slowly. Of all people, Amanda. She looked thinner, tired. Her usual smug air was gone. Her lipstick was faded and her eyes darted around like she knew she shouldn't be here. "How did you get in?" I asked, not unkind but far from welcoming. "I RSVP'd through a mutual," she said quickly. "I didn't come to start anything. I wanted to say something. Please." I tilted my head. "Go on." Her voice was fragile, almost frightened. "I didn't know what Nick was doing." "Not really. He said you were over. That you'd moved on." "I didn't mean to. Bet $100 I'd cry?" I cut in, voice low and sharp. She flinched. I took a slow sip of my champagne. "You knew what you were doing. You didn't care what it cost me because you thought I was disposable. You thought he'd replace me and you'd get to play queen of a new little empire. I was wrong. You were cruel," I said. "That's not the same thing." She opened her mouth, but I held up a hand. "Let me make something very clear to you, Amanda. I have no interest in revenge anymore. I don't need it. I already won. What you and your brother lost, you'll never get back. And what I gained, you couldn't buy it with every dollar I ever gave that man." Her eyes watered. "He lost everything. His credit, his reputation, he's broken." I shrugged. "That's what happens when you gamble a good woman's loyalty and bet against her strength." She looked down, then back up. "I wanted to say sorry." "Then say it to yourself," I said. "I'm not the one who needs to hear it." And I walked away. I didn't look back. Later that night, when the music had slowed and the last toasts were raised, I slipped into my private office above the ballroom to catch my breath. The windows looked out over the city, lights stretching endlessly beneath a dark sky. I kicked off my heels, sat on the edge of my desk and let the quiet settle around me like silk. There was a knock at the door. "Come in," I said, not turning. Trina entered with 2 glasses of wine and that half-smile she wore when she was proud but didn't want to say it out loud. "You're gonna be on every cover next month," she said, handing me a glass. "We made it." I clinked my glass against hers. "No. I made it. You just refused to let me give up." "Same thing." We sat in silence for a moment. Then she handed me a small package. "What's this?" "It arrived earlier. No return address. Handwritten." I peeled the wrapping off carefully. Inside was a velvet box. My stomach dropped before I even opened it. Inside, a charm bracelet. My old one. The one Nick had custom-made in our 2nd year of marriage. Back when we still believed in us. It had charms for our first apartment, our honeymoon in Belize, and a tiny little house I'd once said reminded me of our future family. I hadn't seen it since the night he served me divorce papers. I'd assumed he threw it out. There was a card tucked underneath. "You really didn't cry. You won. I regret everything. Nick." I stared at it for a long time. Then I opened my desk drawer, pulled out the fireproof shredder bin, and dropped both the card and the bracelet inside. I watched the blades chew through the past like it meant nothing. Because it didn't anymore. He could keep his regret. I didn't need it. Closure wasn't a gift. It was a decision. One I had made long before his apology ever arrived. After the gala, I took a weekend to myself in the mountains. No phones. No meetings. Just me and the sound of wind and pine trees brushing against the cabin. I wrote letters I never sent. To the woman I used to be. To the girl who thought love meant sacrifice without limits. To the wife who stayed too long in silence, mistaking loyalty for love. I told her she did her best. That she wasn't weak. She was simply waiting for the moment she remembered who she was before him. And then I burned them in the fireplace, watching the ashes dance up into the cold night air, disappearing among the stars. When I came back to Seattle, I didn't talk about Nick again. He faded from my world like a story I no longer believed. What remained was mine. My studio. My power. My name, Savannah Lane, not an echo of someone else's dreams, but the architect of her own. And when I stepped into the conference room a week later to meet with investors for my next expansion, one of them asked how I handled stress during failure. I smiled. "I don't fail," I said. "I just rise differently every time." They leaned forward, interested. "Hooked. That was the thing about surviving what should have broken you. You never had to explain yourself again. You were the explanation. And I had no interest in ever looking back." If you felt that revenge was served ice cold and satisfying, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a story where karma comes with a twist. Drop a comment below. What would you have done in Savannah's shoes?